Hello, everybody. My name is David Sherdewan, and I'm doing an interview with Joe Banner. Joe, you want to introduce yourself? Give us a quick 5-second intro.
Sure. I'm Joe. I've done a load of stuff for Dungeon World, and I've got a Patreon, which I release monthly Patreon adventures on at patreon.com/jbinc. That's about it.
Yep. And Joe is one of my heroes in the RPG industry. I love his dedication to releasing quality content so regularly. It's amazing how he keeps the schedule. His adventures are always interesting, and they're free, which is criminal, in my opinion, because they're so good. So I grabbed Joe, and we're going to do some quick discussions about RPG design and layout, specifically focusing on finding artwork for your projects. So why don't we jump right in? The first thing, I guess, the best question for you, Joe, is why do we even need artwork? A lot of new RPG designers sort of hit this barrier with artwork where books have gorgeous artwork. There's a picture on every other page, and that's kind of hard to do for someone without a budget. So why do we even need artwork? Can't the game just stand on its own merits?
Yeah, totally. Because it is a barrier, isn't it? Right? Like it's one thing to have had a great idea, you've had a good D&D campaign or whatever, and you want to put pen to paper. And it can be a real barrier towards taking it to that sort of next step towards saying, well, hey, look, it worked for my group. Why can't it work for the next group? Or why can't I make this into a professional product, quote unquote? And I think it is an important barrier to have, because when you're making a product for someone, when I make something and it goes from being not something I'm just playing with my friends and it's just a few notes up to something that's actually professional, I'm not just trying to say, look, here's how I had a fun time with this thing. I'm also trying to actually open a discussion between me, the writer of the adventure, and you, the potential GM of that adventure, right? It's like you and I, if you, for example, David, were the buyer of the product, and I was the writer of this product, of this RPG product, and a D&D adventure, a Dungeon World adventure, whatever form it might take. I'm sort of coming to you and I'm saying, well, look, here's an idea. Here's some tools I want to get you started in order for you to run a cool game with your friends. But I'm not just telling you when to roll dice and how many hit points a goblin has and whatever. I'm also trying to inspire you. I'm trying to evoke the sort of cool ideas and the imagery that I had initially, or that kind of fed into the idea that I had originally. And I think that artwork can go a long way towards doing that, right? Like picture says 1,000 words, right? So I think that finding the right picture can really help shortcut that way towards setting up that almost communication, that unspoken communication between the person writing a product and releasing said product and the person reading that product and absorbing that product.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I was recently reading Broodmother Sky Fortress by Jeff Rient, and he talked about how you put yourself into the game.
Yep.
Like you're selling them your own inspiration, and it takes more than words to communicate that sometimes.
Definitely. Yeah, there is this sense of I think that when a RPG product has a voice, I think it's a stronger product overall. The most obvious one that comes to mind is Apocalypse World, right? Which obviously needs no introduction in this day and age. And part of what makes that such a strong product is that it has a very strong voice behind it. A lot of that is in the text. So there's imagery being evoked in the way that the text is very crude and uses that kind of coarse imagery, coarse wording, a lot of swear words and stuff, right? But why not? It's in the apocalypse, so let's get on with it. But that is then reinforced. That notion of swear words, it could just be a really sweary book if it had no pictures in it. What's up with this guy? He's just written a load of swear words in his products. But the harsh black and white images reinforce this notion that, no, look, this is a no-nonsense world. This is what it is. It's black and white, but also we're going to play to see where the grey comes in. You know, there's stuff that starts to be thought about on an unconscious level with the right kind of product and the way you're trying to evoke that language. And the right kind of image will help reinforce that language.
So if artwork in an RPG, adventure, or book is so important, then what do we do if we can't afford artwork? I mean, that's kind of a huge barrier. One of the reasons that I reached out to you is because you use a lot of Creative Commons artwork and you incorporate it into your adventures, which I don't see a lot of people doing as well as you're incorporating them. So I guess why use free artwork? You have the notoriety, you have the name power. Why not start spending money on it and like sell your adventures and that kind of thing? Why free?
Yeah, I mean again that's a super good question because, and I think it's something that I will always try and work towards. I suppose the best answer I can give, and this wouldn't be an answer that would apply to everyone, is that I come from a writing background, sure. Like I played Warhammer when I was a kid, and I've always been used to kind of writing game relating products. And obviously that continues to the present day, but also I come from a designer background. I'm kind of used to creating, and I take a sort of personal satisfaction from being able to create a product which is entirely my own. That's absolutely no discredit to having other people's artwork in, quite the opposite. And actually it's probably a downside on my part. I would love to have more artwork in my works that supports more artists on a regular basis, and definitely that's going to be something that I'll be working towards. That being said, I also take personal pride in being able to push out regular releases and not having the anxiety of worrying about that, not having that barrier to entry of thinking, okay, well, what if this artist doesn't come through, and what about this and what about that? Being able to hone a separate skill of being able to have some kind of design and illustration work in there is like a major stress off my mind. To look at someone else who would do that a lot better, I would use, I'd probably use Kevin Crawford as a pretty strong example for someone who can do publishing on a regular basis and actually factors in artwork from professional artists around the globe into his Kickstarter releases. I don't have the link to hand, unfortunately, but maybe I can link it in a Google Plus conversation or something in the chat down the line, where he talks about how not to do a Kickstarter, or how to do a Kickstarter, what not to do in a Kickstarter. And in that he talks about having a selection of rotating artists, which he's got on book, as it were. And the idea is that if one doesn't work, or even 2 or 5, he can rely on the rest to fulfill his stretch goals or his Kickstarter goals or whatever. So, I mean, I would love to have something like that as my setup, but the time I would spend in terms of getting that infrastructure set up, which I guess would kind of factor into my Patreon, that's time away from the creative pursuits, the writing and the rest of it. So it's a challenge, and it's a worthwhile challenge, but I'd say it's a separate challenge. And for someone who wants to try and do what I'm doing, someone trying to just release products on a regular basis, I think that it's a good skill, not a skill to learn, if not to master, to have some of your own product work in there, some of your own Creative Commons stuff that at least gets as close as possible without having to go too far down the artwork line, both time-wise and financial-wise, just as a starting point.
Sure. And so you mentioned that the big investment is time, right? If you have a ton of money, you can hire artists, work with them to evoke the exact kind of feeling and look that you're going for. But when you don't have an art budget, you have to sort of make up for that in time, searching for the right images, trying to find the right pictures. So could you talk a little bit about how is that, like how satisfied are you with the pictures you find? Is it always kind of frustrating to not find exactly what you're looking for? And while you talk, I'm going to sort of scan some of your adventures and their artwork on the screen.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah. Okay, so you do that, because actually I was going to show a couple of bits myself, but let's show some of my bits and I can have a little chat about them. So I'd say, so the original question is sort of how much satisfaction would I gain from the products that I've produced, essentially, from the artwork that's in those books.
Right.
In this one, for example, you can see that I've kind of cut my cloth accordingly, by which I mean I've used images. You saw in the first page there, I had that kind of sidebar, which just kind of evokes a general sense. This is a dwarven mine, essentially. This is a dwarven cargo transport. And I just wanted to evoke a very general sense of like the deep, dark underground, right? I could have just used a screen grab from Lord of the Rings, but I'm breaking a load of copyright infringement. I can't sell it. So I can't use that. So what's the next best thing? Well, I can go on to Creative Commons. I can find images from the British Library and elsewhere to kind of get a sense of caves and cave work. You'll also notice in the background of all of these pages, I've got a kind of a very faint sense. This is actually a very similar image that I'm using in the background. I think it was from searching for mines and mine work, and I've just faded it very lightly into the background just to get a general sense. You kind of get a sense of kind of rocks and stuff. These are like piles of rocks that we've got going on here. It's not much. It doesn't have to be much, but it's just a little bit of texture over the bare pages that just really evokes what's going on here. I got lucky with this image. This is an image off of the Wikipedia Commons, isn't it? which I wouldn't normally use because normally the quality isn't that great. But this was not Matt Colville, Matt Ballara. That was it. A good friend of mine. I haven't seen much of him recently, but used to be on the Dungeon World traveling a lot. Matt Ballara. He helped with this playtest. He was one of the playtesters. And he rolled up pretty much a straight dwarf slayer as his character. So I was like, cool, I'll try and find an image of a dwarf. And I knew that was going to be tricky because you don't find kind of stock images of dwarves and dwarf-like characters very often. But I got lucky. I found that one. So that one went straight in. Obviously, that's my one. If you go back and look through my other adventures, you'll pretty much not find any other images like that. That's the only one I've found to date, short of getting lucky or actually hiring an artist to do so. This would be this image we're looking at right now. That is probably from a Victorian era document. I don't remember. I don't keep full track of all of these details. But what we're roughly looking at here on the left hand side, going into the right hand side here, because these are meant. Actually, David, can you view these as a spread? Is that possible on your PDF viewer? Yeah. So here we go. You can see that what we've got here is we've got two images here back to back. And you can see how they kind of bracket the whole thing. I haven't done this for all of my images and all of my design work, but I have done for some of it when the images have worked. Here we've just got one image that I've just used. I've flipped. And we've just got a sense of mine work going on. There you go. Same idea here. You can get a sense, guys, looking at the picture here where the split in the middle is, where the actual spread. And we've got one large image, which I've split in half and kind of swapped round just to get a sense of using the image correctly. Here's a little trick. Notice how the artwork kind of frames it by going away. So you've got, I'm gesturing at the page, but what we've got here is you've got this kind of rock face on the left-hand side kind of works as a kind of frame. And the ladders also going away kind of echo that. So they're both going kind of away from the page, which helps to kind of form a little frame for the image proper. But it's all just kind of squared off. It's a relatively straightforward idea and gets the job done, right?
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. Yeah. I'm a huge fan of how you get creative with a lot of these artwork and old woodcuts and images from books that might not be exactly what you're looking for, but you sort of chop them up or recolor them and make them work.
Yeah. Exactly. So there's a lot of work that you can do. I would say you were talking earlier about like using artwork, and the word that came to my mind is compromise. It is what I'm doing is still a compromise, because in a perfect world, in an unlimited budget, time and financial wise, yeah, I'd be hiring artists all the time. I'd love to support more artists in order to do that. But in terms of doing what I want to do with my Patreon, which is release something that is essentially released for free, notwithstanding my patrons, who of course are very generous, and I'd always love more of them, patreon.com/jbinc. That notwithstanding, I want to just crack on. I want you guys to see more cool products and use them. So that's why we do what we do. That's why we've got these pieces out here. I don't know if you want to cut to this at the end, but what I can do is we can just use a couple of example images, and I can show you very quickly what I do in Photoshop and Illustrator in order to make those happen. But we can do that now, if that's relevant, David, or we can do that at the end.
Let's sort of preface that with a quick question of where do you start? Do you write the adventure first and then find artwork for it, or do you find some really cool pieces of artwork and write an adventure around it, and then you can show us the Photoshop process?
Yeah. So I would say almost always I will come up with the cool premise first. That might be something that comes up in playtest. It might have been something that, like, I might have been playtesting something else and something cool came out as a result. So you've got this general idea that came through. Or it might have been something that I'm already in the process of playtesting and I'm kind of working out the ideas as I go and seeing kind of what sticks in my mind and what's cool and what's not. More rarely, because I try not to lean on things like Pinterest. I have got quite an expansive stuff on Pinterest in terms of just like mood boards and stuff like that, which I have used in the past. I try not to lean on them too much because it's, if anything, it's kind of bittersweet to be like, oh man, that is such an inspiring picture. Find a Creative Commons thing which is exactly the same as that, damn it, and like I'm just making work for myself. So although I will find myself thinking, yeah, that's a cool picture, I'll then have to try and find a solution for that which is more Creative Commons, or is like taking advantage of someone's artwork, which is just don't do that. That's a horrible idea.
Right.
So most often I will come up with the idea in my head or through play, and that will be built. So I'll be trying to find images that fit that. It's very rare indeed. It's not. It has happened very rarely. I think there was an adventure I did a long while ago called Aubrey Uster, which was around like kind of demonic tree in a demonic forest. Doesn't really narrow it down. That actually came out of finding kind of a cool vein of Creative Commons images. There was like, I think I found like a cool collection from a particular fairy tale, book of fairy tales, or turn of the century kind of fairy tale artwork. So occasionally I will find like a kind of a vein of good ideas, or minor vein of good ideas, and be like, oh, these collections, these work well as a collection. Oh, that's got me this idea. And I will actually grab those images and I'll keep them together and work on something which will work around that. But that's relatively rare. Much more often I will go and find the images that I need for the project in question.
So once you find them, why don't you show us what you do to sort of mix and match and make them work for what your projects are?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm going to show you a couple of web pages real quick, and we're just going to come up with a couple of quick ideas. Thank you for the presentation. So I'm going to screen share my Chrome window I've got here. You can use other browsers, obviously. Don't use Internet Explorer. So what I've got here, you should just be able to see at the top of the window here. This is Flickr, obviously, and this is the British Library's collection of artwork. Now, there are other places, I believe, I can't actually remember who does it, but one of the American libraries also has their entire back catalogue of images and imagery uploaded online. But I don't keep that one to hand just because I can't remember them all. I just use one, but any public domain collection of photos, obviously, is absolutely gold dust. I just happen to use the British Libraries. Now, what I have saved as a bookmark is this link up here. You can have a look at it here. What this actually is a search under the British Library for, as it happens, castles. But what I do is I save this link, and if I need to search for something else, I can just change castle for something else.
I'll include all of these links in the description and on the page so that you can...
Absolutely. So you can see in the search bar here, it's searching the British Library account. That's probably what this W is here, for photos specifically under castle. You can actually switch to Creative Commons licenses directly in here, like commercial use. But for British Library, I don't need to because it's public domain for all of them. So that's very beneficial. So what I might do, let's say, what you tell me, David, give me something as an example. Give me a very broad setting, something as broad as castle that I might use.
Let's give you something tricky. How about a sewer adventure? Sewer pictures are kind of hard and grimy, so let's do like a sewer sort of a thing.
Yeah, totally. So so it's good to keep something like this link saved to your favorites, because when you comes up with something like a sewer, you've got to get a bit left field. So sewers, well, let me think. I'd probably go in from an angle of like Victoriana or something of that era. The British Library photos are really good for images that, as you can see from these first few, will take you around kind of the turn of the century, or kind of 16th, 17th, 18th, 19th century, probably up to the start of World War I. So you can get some great images for something like sewer works. If I search for sewer itself, let's see what we find. Might find something nice here, might get lucky. But not great. I've used this one before. This one's quite nice. As a kind of Victoriana era mine entrance or sewer entrance. This is often something that might happen, is I might say, oh, well, this hasn't quite hit the mark for this one. It might be useful for something down the line, and I'll try and remember that. What you'll often get, though, is you can start searching through these tags. So you can see all these tags here. These Sherlock Net tags are ones that the British Library have added specifically. So they'll say, okay, let's see, something like, oh, does that say archway? Architecture. That might be handy, because I'm looking for like arches underneath. Something like, I want to look for a bit of an aqueduct. Now, I want the British Library specifically. And look, we can see we've got lots of images here that will hit that tag. There are other ones, and many of these might be public domain as well, but a lot of them won't be. So let's stick with what we've got here on the British Library. The architecture one. Right, here we go. Now we're getting somewhere. Could use something like this. I found a dungeon. So now I'm thinking, oh, dungeon. That's got to be useful for all sorts of things. So that one's pretty handy. Let's go back. What else we got here? Go away, pop up. I'm normally logged. I don't know why I'm not logged in here, but that might be handy depending on the era of dungeon. This one here. Because sort of I could do a nice close up on that door. That could be useful for stuff. Shop front stuff is often quite handy, especially if it's more. I do tend to do more urban adventures, and you could almost argue this might be why. Like, I know I can find more urban imagery than not.
That's
something
true.
like that. Something like this one is handy for Blades in the Dark. Quite a nice rundown house. Again, we've got another one over here. Quite nice, actually. So you get these odd things. I know we've come a bit off topic for the sewer one. Here's quite a good one for sewers. There's quite a nice one right there.
Ooh,
a nice rundown
yeah.
sort of sewery type thing here. So we'll have a little look, see how big a photo we can get. Yeah, 987 odd. That's all right. We'll grab that. Save that. Yeah, that's not too bad. It's not too bad. And then we might grab a few of those. I might grab a few of those, but let's just use that one as an example.
Sure.
So if I wanted to, now I think I need to, yeah, here we go. Get Photoshop open. And I'm just going to open this up in Photoshop real quick. So I'm just going to drag this in. Go on, load up. I've got quite a lot of windows open. That's probably why. Here it comes. There we go. Right. So to use this in my nice, quick and easy to use it in a Patreon, where I just know it's going to be black and white. I don't need to worry too much about print quality. I just want something nice in the background for screen quality. Something like those sidebars we saw in Keller's Guns just now. I'd probably do something like this. I'd crop it to like this much. So I'd crop out like that much. Got a little corner there. That's all right. I would, you can see I've got a lot of quick things here to do. Some of those are for Patreon, some of those for other things. For this, what I want to do is I want to go to image. No, I don't want to go to image. Do I want to go to image? Adjust. Here we go. Saturation, desaturate. I want to get rid of that yellowish tinge, and I want to run it back into pure black and white. That means that when I fade it into the background, it'll be more than like a straightforward color. I might then change it back again using things in InDesign directly. And then I might also, depending on the quality of the image, I might also go to adjustments, levels. Yeah. The levels controls the degree of black and white that's present in the image. So with some of these kind of grainy images, it's often quite useful to bring the darks up. You see, as I'm pulling this slider, the blacks into the dark more, I'm getting much more kind of stronger shadows. Okay. I can bring the whites in to make the whites more stark as well. This basically updates the contrast, but in a very kind of significant way. So it's quite bold. It looks quite grainy here, but if I zoom in, and you can imagine this, if I just quickly make this transparent, if I faded this into the background, you can already start to see that nice as a kind of faded background element in the back of any page, really.
Yeah, that is nice.
So it could be faded like that, or maybe I would, whoops. Maybe I'd do a kind of half and half thing on the page. So if I make this page closer to, what do I want? I want it to be like 210 by, I want to work out how big that should be, 287. Oops. So that's sort of the dimensions. I'm doing it roughly here, but that's roughly the dimensions of an A4 or A5 page, or kind of letter size. So I might make that a little bit bigger. I'm going to lose some quality by doing that, but that's okay. Oops. It doesn't have to be amazing quality for this. It's just, that's one of your compromises, is that you want to try and make design choices that mean that it doesn't have to be the best possible quality. But if I then had this, say, over here, and if I then cropped it, normally I do a lot of this cropping in InDesign, but for the purposes of this, I'll do it here. There we go. In InDesign, I might start playing around with a little kind of background element like that. Then I have all my text in here. Blah, blah, blah. Well, okay. Text gone. There we go. I don't know why it's capitalized. There we go. There we go. You get the idea.
Cool.
Right. And then we're already starting to kind of get a sense of how that, oh, whoops, did that wrong. Might get a sense of how that's starting to look on the page. And that would be how I would play around. Very quick, very fast and loose. Just like, okay, well, I can block out these elements and fill that with some kind of like complementary design element, not like an artwork piece, not like. So if I've commissioned a piece of artwork, like I've done for the Green Scar and Shadows of Umberto, and hopefully for my upcoming Mercassa book as well, I have commissioned some art from Vandal. Vandal J. Arden, who's done some lovely character work for me. Those ones, when I get them, they are the centerpiece of the image. So I will design the text around that image. Here, the text takes precedence. So I just tend to write the text first, and I will block out a space to take, okay, well, I need this much space being filled, so I will do it that way. Very quickly as well, I'm just going to jump back to my search over here. I want to show you guys very, very quickly the other thing I did there. So when we go back to Keller's Gund, what we had was we had columns of images like we just showed, and I also had those background elements. So the background elements are done very quickly as well, but also slightly differently. I need to find something which is a little bit more kind of diagrammatic or logo-like. So I might find something like bit too many here. Let's go back a couple of sections to those are still castles. Let's go back to our castles, and let's go to something like that's quite a good one. That's quite a good castle, by the way. So right off the bat, you've got a nice castle there. What I'm looking for is like a kind of background design element. I'll know it when I see it. It'll be like a bookend sort of image. You can see there's some lovely castle images in here already.
And Joe, you've
what I'm
been
really
doing
looking
this
for is something which is,
what, 3 years now? 4?
Since 2013, I think now, yeah. Doing much the same sort of technique. I started most of these techniques around then and haven't radically changed them since, to be honest. I think my first, I can't even remember now. David, when have I started doing this from? You tell me.
I think that's about the time frame. The question I was wondering is, have you noticed like an increase in your ability to pick out good images, see like the possibilities of an image faster and more easily?
Yeah, I'd say that's about right. Yeah. I probably found it easier to zoom in to a section which makes sense, if that makes sense, right? Like, although I can't really pick one out of the top of my head for here and now, there are certainly times when I've gone like, oh yeah, I need to go to, I don't need to go to castles to find a picture of a castle. I want to go to book or something. Like there was a few random links where I found in the past where it's like that works quite well. I've also started using non-background info, like things like Unsplash here, which is a very useful. Unsplash is a lovely, unsplash.com is a really, really good website for stock photos. So you can provide these with credit to the author, or which I provide credit in the back of all of my books. And
right.
it'll give you direct credits here quite easily in order to do that. So, I mean, right off the bat here, this is just one of the latest things. We found this lovely temple. So the same technique I was doing in Photoshop here would work equally well to render this in black and white. And you get amazingly high quality images here. Like this is really, really good high quality. But the thing I'm looking for, sod's law, I can't find it now.
So here's another question, since while you're looking.
Yeah, go for it.
What do you do when you can't find what you're looking for? Like, have you ever had to abandon a project because you just couldn't find any good images or pictures?
Yeah, you know, it's funny. Off the top of my head, I can't think of any, but I think I have done. I think I have like got really far in projects and been like, you know what, I can't quite finish this, and it's really frustrating. It's absolutely frustrating when that happens, but it does happen from time to time, and it's like, you know what, I've got to table this for the purposes of what I do, in as much as a regular stream of products coming out. Yes, right. Sometimes I have kind of put a nail in stuff and said, I'll come back to that at a different point.
Right.
Skull. That might work quite well. It's relatively rare, though. This is what I wanted. Here we go, skull. Good old skull.
Nice.
If in doubt, put a skull in the background, right? So we're going to do the same thing as before. We're going to download this nice big skull picture. But what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to throw it into Illustrator. So I'm just going to start a basic image in Illustrator here. Oh, it's a weird size, but that doesn't matter. The size matters even less for these ones, as you'll see in a moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place an image. Now, if you guys don't know what how Illustrator works, generally speaking, in Illustrator, you work in vectors. So, and the images we've been working with so far are raster images, which means that they are rasterized, which is to say, if you expand them beyond their original boundaries, they're going to lose quality because the JPEG has been made in such a way that you can't expand them any further. They are set. They are an image. They are incontrovertible. You can't change them. However, when you make stuff in Illustrator, instead of saying, okay, this pixel is exactly this many pixels away from that pixel, you will have vector images instead. Images that you can, in other words, rescale to be as small as a business card or as huge as a banner, like whatever you need. So what I like to do in Illustrator, and I actually do this a little bit more, like this in. I might tidy it up in Photoshop first, but we can just throw this in, it's fine. I'll place this image in, and I will embed it into the image, and I'll do this up here, I'll live trace. Converts raster images into tracing objects. Now notice what happens when I do this. You can already see I'm 90% of the way there. I'm going to expand this. So in other words, this is still a single image, albeit of white and black lines. I'm going to expand this into an actual image, which will give me all of these details here. And then I'm going to do a few other tricks. I'm going to jump in. So I've now selected the white. You can see I've sort of selected parts of this now. I'm going to select this bit of white here. I'm going to delete it. I'm actually going to, although you can't see it, there is actually loads of little white circles like that one there. I'm going to select all the white out of this by selecting one bit of white and then going to select same fill color. I can find all the bits of white in a stroke. I'm going to delete them, just deleted them by pressing delete there. I'm also going to, I just want to use that skull on the right. I don't really need this one on the left right now. So I'm going to delete that. I'm going to get rid of these little bits here. I'm going to get rid of this little bit of definition on the top because I don't really need it. And I'm going to come out and I'm now left with a nice skull sort of vector. Pretty clear already that you can see I can make huge, like absolutely humongous on the page. I can try. There we go. Woo! So it's huge, and yeah, I mean it's not a quality image in itself, right? Like there's not a lot of definition to this image, but what is there is really, really nicely defined.
Right.
Now let's put this into a real world example. Let's go back into Photoshop and let's put in some nice Lipsum text here. What I'm gonna do really quickly is just grab some dummy text to use space as if it's a pretend page. Okay. So here we go. Normally I do this in InDesign, but it doesn't matter. We're just going to do it here. All right. So this is what our page is looking like. This is all right. We're getting there. But what I'd like to do is really set apart this text from this image here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take this nice skull that we've got in the background. I'm going to copy it. Just right-click, copy. I'm going to throw it into Photoshop or InDesign, or if you guys are using open source programs, these techniques will also work in the GIMP. They'll also work in Inkscape. They will work in Scribus. I don't use those very much, so I don't know the exact ways, but I do know that these processes are very, very similar no matter what programs you're using. I'm actually using some very old versions of Photoshop and Illustrator here, so you can expect these to work quite well, even in modern versions of open source programs. Now I'm going to finish pasting that image in around there, and all I'm going to do is just give us a sense of this in the background like that. Super scary background image. And we're then going to just bring the opacity right down to 11%. Only 11 because I'm too lazy to put the 0 in. I just press 1 twice. And that's it. There we go. Look, you can see we've got, so we're looking at this on the page and we get a sense of what's there. We know there's the skull. But if you were reading this neat, you're now looking at a page which is, it's busy, but it's not like overburdened with busy. Now, if I was playing around with this in InDesign, I'd probably start playing around with the columns a bit here. I would probably have a bit more margin space here, just to give this text a little bit more room to breathe. And you can see that you can start playing around with these images. This is a whole other story. Maybe we'll do this another time about white space and whatnot. But I linked some stuff, didn't I, David, on your Google Plus when we were talking about this, the rules of typography by Richard Elimar, if I remember right.
Yep.
Did we link this in here?
There will be tons and tons of links on a bunch of resources below this video.
Yeah. So reference those if you like, and maybe we'll do a follow-up video if people have questions. But what you're looking at here, I hope I'm actually looking at the wrong window. Yeah, there we go. What we're looking at there, in brief, is so let's share screen, and here I am. Hey, I'm back.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So it's that. So that writ large is how I can just kind of block in information on a case-by-case basis for the content of a page. Now, covers are a bit different. Covers, I will use those techniques and more to make a kind of a photoshopped document. And I will use that for both the Patreon cover and then the book cover itself. But they're not dissimilar techniques. And you could just do whatever you wanted really for covers. You could do like nice minimalist covers. You can do blank covers. You can do paid for covers. You could, you might just spend a bit extra on the cover work, whatever you want to do. But that in a nutshell is how I would actually use stock photography to just very quickly fill in and just add a bit of extra definition and a bit more, a bit more kind of oomph to a written project.
No, that's really incredible, Joe. I know that as a creator myself, often working without a budget, it is extremely disheartening to look at beautiful books like Numenera, like Pathfinder or 5th edition that have these huge artwork spreads, and it's easy to feel like there's no way we could measure up to that or make anything that looks as nice or as impressive. And work like yours is a good example to us that we can still make things that look nice as long as we're willing to be sort of careful with our image placement, learn some new techniques, and apply the resources that we have thanks to the world of the internet and Creative Commons artwork. Do you have any sort of closing words of encouragement for people who are struggling with this?
Yeah, I would. I don't be really just building on what you've just said there. If you are trying to build a product of your own and you're not sure where to start, just start small and work your way up. It's no problem to start with something. Just do something as an exercise in itself, right? Just say, okay, I want to write an adventure about boats. And I need to find all the stuff about boats and just keep it real simple. That's how I started, after all, was using all these techniques to do I'm on a boat, which is now on the Dungeon World homepage. And by starting that and working and just working in small parts, it's really important to just do little bits and bobs like that in order to get a sense that you can, if that makes sense. So keep working until you feel confident you can do it, and then just keep doing more of that, I guess. That's not the best words of encouragement. Just do it. Just you guys are awesome. You can sort it all out. Like, people are doing patrons all the time. They're all amazing. And David, also another thing worth saying as well, like I've been talking about like sort of professional and semi-professional designing programs. I've obviously got those as a result of my design background, but I've already mentioned open source stuff. David, you do a lot of your work in Office, don't you? In LibreOffice.
And Google Docs as well.
If I remember right. Exactly. Yes, because you again, we'll put links to that at the end, but I use Google Docs for a lot of my kind of text work and just kind of, again, blocking in. There's nothing wrong with that. There are no wrong ways of doing it. If you leave a message on Google Plus or Facebook or wherever asking for advice, you'll get 100 different bits of advice. But the important thing to remember is if you've got an awesome idea, they're all valid. Do it, get it out there, get it released. You can always iterate and do it again and just keep working on it and work out what works for you. Yeah.
And if they're interested in sort of reading more of your work and hearing your lovely voice and your fantastic accent more, what are some of the things that projects you've got going on or channels that they can reach you at?
Okay, so you can always catch me on, excuse me, my lovely voice, it's going. You can always catch me on Google+. I'm not so prolific on Google+, but I will always be around. So if you want to ping me a message at Joe Banner, you can find me via David stuff or elsewhere. Then I'm always happy to chat about this in more detail. Place you can find me is via my Patreon, which, as I've said already, I think is patreon.com/JBInc84, I think. David, what's my Patreon again? It is that, isn't it? There is an 84 at the end. Patreon.com/home. Yes, that's me. Yeah, so my Patreon's the main place to find me. You can also find me on my website, which is joebanner.co.uk. So there's links to my Patreon and all my previous things there. I've got stuff on Drive-Thru RPG. Have a look at that. That's if you want to grab some Dungeon World products for a few pounds more. All my things that are in print, they're all through Drive-Thru. I'm still working on more stuff. I'm always working on more stuff. I'm working towards more print products, more. I like to do some streaming on Twitch, although I do that only occasionally. So if you want to see more of that, let me know. And
yeah, thank you so much for coming on, Joe. This is really educational. I really enjoyed seeing your process and how you can take something that doesn't look super impressive at first and put them together and make it look like a really slick, put together product. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Oh, my pleasure. Yeah. And if there's any other questions, just to reiterate, any other questions anyone's got on the process, you want me and David to do another quick video or a little write-up or whatever, just let us know.
Yep.
Let David know. I won't handle it. He'll handle all that.
Yep. There'll be tons of links to resources and helpful instructions, and you can find both of our stuff. My stuff's at the Technical Grimoire, which I'll put links to. And thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Joe. And good luck, everybody.
Take care, guys.